On what is sometimes referred to as the Sixth Great Lake, at the mouth of the St. Clair River, is the only major river delta in the Great Lakes. I was hoping to focus on a single island here, but the more time I spent surveying it from above, the more it makes sense to understand this mess of islands as a whole, interconnected and related. The river forms part of the international border between the US and Canada, Michigan on one side and Ontario on the other. And in what is known as the St. Clair Flats, a veritable mess of islands of various shapes and sizes, most of them without names. The Canadian side, for some reason, is much tidier, with unceded territory in large land masses, like Walpole Island, but I'll resist the urge to force an allegory. Besides, in this case I'm much more drawn to the small and weird. I start my journey following the Bates Highway, which feels mostly human-made, a jigsaw of structures, causeways, seawalls, docks, a lighthouse. Mixed in is the odd island that has been left alone for the time being. I continue on and into the Little Muscamute Bay, a name that carries such a whimsy that I'm somehow not surprised to find a random house or cottage on a comparatively disconnected island. There's so many of these rock outcropping islets strewn about this delta. The lake is unusually shallow on average, and I can't help but notice all of the water highways that must have been dredged to allow boat access for all of these residences, and for recreation and fishing. I make my way to McDonald Island, drawn first to the large uninhabited area before shifting to the more developed narrow edges. Circling around Long Point Bay and landing on a vaguely square island that sits between three undisturbed islands. The contrast is stark and almost comical. This place is an island because it is surrounded by water. I suppose that's a low water mark of the classification, because it feels like more of a houseboat, at least from above. Further along towards the center of Lake St. Clair, I encounter another such geometric island. On it, the so-called Octagon House, a design from the mid-19th century, but I can't confirm whether this specific structure goes back that far. The limitations of viewing from a single overhead angle on relatively low-resolution satellite imagery. Sweeping north towards Strawberry Island. Finally, some greenery. I realized that maybe all the brown was just a matter of the season in which the satellite photos were taken. Either way, this area along the so-called Johnny's Highway feels less stark. The lines are softer, the contrast between what the river has formed and what people have is less noticeable. I continue on in this way for a while, scanning the delta for points of intrigue, noticing odd things, appreciating the natural formations amidst the grabbing up of one's own island. And the next thing I know, I'm reading through a 2002 newsletter from the Ontario Archaeological Society, trying to pinpoint the exact location of the so-called Crawford Knoll site. This is where bones and artifacts were found after excavations in the late 1970s. Evidence of indigenous people living and fishing for food in this area, as long ago as several thousand years. It doesn't feel important to locate the exact coordinates of the site, so I hover and take in the general area, appreciating, as always, the vantage point in time and history I've been granted.